Welcome, everybody. This is Debbie Mayberry with National Kitchen and Bath Association. You're here for how to design a custom wine and spirits storage solution with Mark Karpinski, who is the Director of Sales for WineRacks.com. Mark, if you're there, we're going to get started, so I'll move to your screen, and we're ready to go.
Thank you, Deb. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to some of you, and a very early good morning to some of you, too, I'm sure. My name is Mark Karpinski. I'm the Director of Sales for WineRacks.com, and I've been consulting and designing to wine storage solutions for almost 17 years. And about 15 years ago or so, became very frustrated with clients that could not perceive what their wine cellar was going to look like via our consultation. It needed to be designed, and so we were designing in AutoCAD, which I'm sure a lot of you are very experienced in, but that still wasn't painting the picture for the layperson that is very blown away by pictures. Today's popularity of websites like House and Pinterest and things like that are painting a picture for clients. So that's what headed our company into doing three-dimensional designs. And once we started doing that, the sales of wine storage solutions just spiked because we were able to paint that picture. So what I'm here to do today is to give an overview to each one of you and take some of the mystique out of a room that many of you probably don't have a lot of experience in designing, let alone understanding the particular needs of proper wine storage, whether it be climate control or what is the proper location of a wine room. So first of all, we just follow along and talk about some of the market trends that tell us that wine storage solutions are a factor in a lot of homes. Over 120 million Americans are drinking wine weekly, and homeowners are looking to build wine storage somewhere in their home. And many home buyers are looking to purchase a home that has the wine storage in it. So there's a lot of opportunities out there, and you don't need to tell your client, well, go straight to a wine racking company. You will be able to provide a solution to them. The first thing you got to do is get into this space, into this home, and look for potential places to have wine storage. Now, years ago, it was simply the wine cellar in the basement. You didn't see a lot of other things, and then slowly along came wine refrigerators, and then after that, we started to see wine cellars move upstairs in the home. So it's a focal point. People wanted to show off that wine collection. They really realized what a great visual it is in the home. And so we started exploring a lot of different options. In this particular case, under stairwells, little closet nooks, even a spare wall in a room, something done in a 4 or 5 foot area of a dining room or anything like that, a kitchen cabinet with a roll-out drawer with wine storage. We're seeing it all of these days, and it's just not downstairs. The one thing we got to do is make sure that the space is adequate for the type of storage that's going to be done. Are there obstructions that are going to prohibit there from being wine racking or wine storage on those walls or floors? Is there direct light or a source of heat or vibration, which are all not friendly to proper wine storage? So we're going to identify spaces that are not erratic or high temperatures. If there is going to be environmental control, perfect wine storage, that would mean 55 to 58 degrees in temperature and 55 to 60% in humidity. Now, in some spaces on a wall and displaying 8 or 10 bottles, that's not a big deal to a client, but proper wine storage is done under strict environmental control conditions. And there are places that you haven't even thought of that could be proper wine storage rooms, in a closet, under a staircase. We've done plenty of wine rooms that are out in a garage, in a nook of a dining room, or behind glass in a side hallway room. It's any place that we can create these conditions, you can do a design for. The first thing we got to do is consult with the client. We got to find out what if they have a space in mind, and then that way we can determine whether it's a proper location. In this particular instance, here's a before space, a place that a client has come to us and said, this is where I'd like to have it. Is it possible? Can we work with this space? And it may be an insulated area. It may have a full vapor barrier on it, and it may eventually have cooling in there. But for now, this particular client might be saying, I'm just fine with having the wine storage here. So this is that space that we're intending to measure out, and this is what that space turned out to be afterwards. And we know that this did not have environmental control in it because they put a wine fridge into that room to chill their selected bottles of wine. And in that consultation, we tell people that we ask people, what is it in design that you're looking for? Are we looking for a contemporary or a traditional look? We see here just straight wooden wine racking solution. This happens to be in mahogany, or a little bit of more of a metro look with metal racking. A combination of perhaps both metal and wood, or even a very, very unique spot in the kitchen for a small amount of storage with metal racking in it. Obviously, whatever we're putting into environmentally controlled rooms specifically needs to be able to handle the conditions of that wine room. So there are wood species that are ideal for both the structural integrity of the wine racking, but also the environmental conditions. We're running a humidity of 55 to 60% in here. So we like hardwoods and woods that are moisture and mildew, rot resistant, very popular over the last 25 years. For us, in particular, is the natural mahogany. There is also oak. You could see cellars done in redwood, black walnut, maple. Those are all acceptable materials. You want to have them be non-aromatic woods. And also don't want to throw a lot of stains or finish options on these things, because if you have an environmental control, a cooling unit in a room, that air is just recycled and recycled and recycled. And when you have a stain or a finish, even if it is water-based stain, there is odors and gases that are given off by these finishes, and that can get into the corks of the wine bottles and taint the taste and the properties of that wine. So our recommendation is a natural wood, non-aromatic wood. If there must be a stain or a finish, always make sure that it is water-based, and tell the customer ahead of time why these kinds of things are important. You may actually be educating them too. So after we have this consultation about where are potential locations, what is the purpose of this space? Is it going to be just simply a functional, out of sight, out of mind wine storage? Or is this going to be something that is a showcase? We want to show this thing off to all of our friends and visitors. Or what happens to be the majority of cases, the combination of both. It's got to be able to perform the function of a proper wine storage, but then also have some flair to it too. And that's, I think, more times than not what you're going to run into. Traditional versus contemporary, that's just personal taste. In the design library that we could provide to you, you'll have options galore. It can be traditional, contemporary, or a combination of both. Really the most important thing to understand is what are the requirements for how many bottles we're going to store. I can tell you from many years of experience, on average, for every linear foot of wall space that we have, we're going to be able to get about 40 to 50 bottles stored. And people will be surprised by that. And they'll tell you, I've got this room. It's got 6-foot side walls and an 8-foot back wall, and say, but I only need 200 bottles of storage. Is that enough space? Well, if we do the math, 6 plus 6 and plus 8 is 20 linear feet of wall space. Now, we can fit 800 to 1,000 bottles in that space. But because we are experienced designers too, we can make a bigger room look full by using certain items out of the library that fill space, that don't fulfill a tremendous amount of capacity storage. The things we need to know for details before the room is designed is the detailed dimensions. What kind of obstructions are there in the room? Soffits, columns, windows. What portion of that room is going to be dedicated to this? And will there be environmental control in this room? And where will that potentially be located? What kind of storage do you need to have? Are you going to be buying cases of wine in wooden boxes? Are they 6-bottle cases, or are they 12-bottle cases? It's a different size box, requires a different type of storage. What is the focal point of that wine storage going to be? Is it going to be an arch with a tasting table? Is it going to be some kind of display cabinet or stemware racking? Or maybe no focal point at all, because it could just be simple functional storage. Are you going to be looking into this room through glass walls, glass door, or is it behind a solid wood door and you don't see anything until that door opens? What format are the bottles? Some of you might know what a standard 750 milliliter bottle is. Some of you may know that those come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. They're all 750 milliliter, but the shape of that bottle and the way that they may stack in bulk storage is important. Making sure that the slots of the wine racking can accept those size bottles is a very important thing, as well as a category that's quite popular today too, and that's called magnum racking. That's 1.5 liter, which makes it essentially two of this bottle, the Bordeaux or the Cabernet, inside of one bottle. And that's a different format and size. Just to let you know, in our component library, every single rack is formatted for 750 milliliter bottles, the standard bottles, but also can include these more bulbous versions of 750 milliliter bottles, small champagnes, a Pinot Noir, a Burgundy, anything up to 3 3/4 inches in diameter. If it's bigger than that, then we have racking that's specifically labeled as such, magnum racking, big champagnes, Turleys. So there is nothing that your client can tell you about how they collect wine that we cannot provide a storage solution for. And to give somebody an idea of some of the materials that we discussed, it's just some materials that could be a wood choice, some metals that could be a metal finish or a type of display. Again, all of these choices are in the component library and available. And a lot of times, wine cellars, wine storage are done with a combination of both wood and metal. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We happen to have a wine storage design questionnaire that we provide to our partners or to our clients in advance of this process. This basically covers what we discussed. What is the client trying to do? What are the specs of this room? And if you have some version of this, it's highly recommended. This is kind of your checklist of the things that you need to know before you can start a design, but also a checklist of what your client should know before you start the design. And if you don't have a questionnaire, you probably do use questionnaires when it comes to your kitchen and bath designers or interior designers, architects. You got some type of questionnaire that you're working with. We'd be more than happy to provide you with a template of a wine storage design questionnaire that you can format to your own needs. So now we're going to head into the actual design elements of creating a custom storage solution. Again, we're going to know our room specifications. We're going to know what our customers' preferences are. We know what type of environmental concerns we have with the space. And we are going to today design in SketchUp. But many of you, I'm sure, are working in 2020 or in Chief, Pro Kitchen, AutoCAD, you name it. Our library is available out there for you to use, and it's compatible with all of those. I'm just going to go with this room that somebody came to us with a few months ago. This was the specification of it: a 7-foot wide room, 6.5 feet deep, and an 8-foot high ceiling. And they said that even though it was a relatively small room, they wanted to get as close to 800 to 1,000 bottles as they could get, but they also, this was going to have glass door on it. They wanted there to be a focal point on this back wall and have a good visual through that door. And in their storage requirements, they did have some wood 12-bottle wood cases. They also wanted to display some of their higher end bottles or show off bottles. They wanted good presentation from that standpoint. And they also had some miscellaneous other size bottles that didn't require, there wasn't such a significant quantity that anything other than just a bulk storage compartment would be able to handle. So this is really where the designer has to do their advanced planning. If we know that we've got 7 feet of this back wall to work with and 6.5 feet on each of the side walls, the first design element potentially could be a curved corner. And this curved corner takes up 2 feet in both directions of a wine room. So if we go back to this room and look here and say, well, geez, if I have a curved corner here and a curved corner over here, I've already used up 4 feet out of the 7 feet of this back wall design. How can I have a lot of visual presentation on that back wall if all I have is 3 feet left to work with? So we're seeing a trend in this industry that has shifted slightly away from the heavy use of curved corners into what we call voided corners. And that's where the racking that runs down the side walls makes a merge with the racking that's on the back wall. Now, obviously, what that's going to do is that's going to create a void in each of the corners, and you don't want to see into those voids. So we use what we call voided corner panels. Now, these panels only need to be the depth of the wine racking, which ours happens to be 12 3/8. But now, if we take these voided corner panels to this room and pull them in, we can see now, if we take a snap measurement, whoops, I'm going to clean that up a little bit. We have no longer have 3 feet of which to work with. We have 4 feet 11 1/4. So that's a significant amount of space that we just opened up for presentation and visual impact for a focal point by going this route rather than going with a curved corner in each corner. Now for the racking, I've put together just for a time standpoint ease. I've gone through here and took components out of a library, and I want to show you this library is literally broken down to every type of storage you can imagine. There are base cabinets. There are various arches, diamond bins of all shapes and sizes, individual racking, quarter rounds, minor and miscellaneous components. Our library is 15 years old, and anything that was a piece that was used for more than one client that has some relevance, it's in here. So you're all experienced designers. I'm sure that you've been frustrated when an item that you'd like to include in a design out of some block 3D warehouse or something doesn't work. Well, you're not going to need to modify anything when you get your hands on our library, because there are tons and tons of options in design. The only thing you need to keep in mind is that a design is basically done in up to 3 levels. You have your base racking, which is going to be 39 3/4 tall. That gets us up to tabletop height. Folks in the kitchen and bath industry and the design industry, you can provide your own stone tabletops, although there's plenty of butcher block options too. The second level of racking, which is from here to here, is going to be, in more cases than not, 38 1/4 tall. Those first 2 stages take us to 6.5 feet. And that's a very comfortable height for a lot of people's needs. But if they want to go higher, want to go to the ceiling, want to push capacity even more, then the third level would be the modular racking, which can extend us up to infinity. In this particular case, I'm using a 15 3/4 inch height. So this cellar is coming in at 93 3/4 inches before crown molding is applied. So now we're going to get rid of these measurements here. And I'm going to pull this into this wine room. And again, you'd be coming in with one component at a time, but now you understand base, upper, and modular. And this comes in onto that 7-foot wall. And there we have our back wall of this wine room with a tremendous visual impact through that front glass door. Now, this room did have a need for a cooling system, and we have determined that we've learned from the client that there is a utility room to the right wall side of this. Environmental control ideally is up high in a room, and sometimes not even visible in a room. Cooling can be piped in, just like central air, a split system, a through the wall system, or what they call a remote system, that basically is a unit that sits in some other room of the house, a utility room or another area of the house, and then that air is piped to and from the wine cellar, similar to central air split system, but it's called a remote system, and that is gives you multiple options for how you can do environmental control. But ideally, the source of the cold air you want high, because the cold air is going to drop in a room, and the warm air that's rising to the top of the room is going to be taken in the intake of this unit and then reconditioned and sent back into the room. So high up on a wall is ideal. So I saw that coming in advance, and so what I did was, as I prepared this right wall racking, again, base racking on the bottom, then upper racking for 38 1/4. But when I got to the top of the room, I knew that I needed to be leaving a space for the cooling system. So instead of having that modular unit run completely across the top, I put a 2-column instead of a 6-column rack there to leave a space for the cooling system. So we'll bring this into the room, and we forgot to mention too, we talked about some miscellaneous bottles that the client has that they could use some bulk storage for. That's what this unit is here. Again, multiple different sizes in this library. I'm just going to rotate this 90 degrees. And bring that into the wine room. Now you'd be designing piece by piece inside the wine room, but again, for the purposes of moving this process along, I had it pre-designed. A room this size, after you've done a couple, take you less than an hour or so to do. So it's not a monumental task at all. Now on this left wall, we don't have a cooling unit to, let me clean up the location of that cooling unit there a little bit better. On this left wall, you don't have a lot to contend with. There's no obstructions. The only thing that we haven't done in this wine room that the customer did say that they have a need for is some type of 12-bottle wood case storage. So in this design, I made sure to include a wood case cabinet. Now this happens to be used again on that 39 3/4 base level. There are wood case storage options that are available as an upper or even as a modular. But I should say that more times than not, it makes good sense to keep any type of bulk storage down at the lower levels. Who wants to be reaching up 6 feet high to pull off a 12-bottle wood case or to pull a bottle out of a diamond bin that's way up high in the air and bulk bottles are stacked in? So as a general, very general rule, the bulk storage, the case storage, either is happening here or if it's a must, moved into the first tier of the upper. And while we're talking about upper racks, some of you might have noticed that this rack right here looks different than the rack that's down on the base or as the modular. And that's this very, very bottom row here. This is what's called the slanted display row. In some rooms, it could be what's termed a high reveal row. These are put in at a 20-degree angle, and your bottle lays on there with the neck facing towards the wall, unlike the rest of the wine cellar that the neck will be out. And up at a 20-degree angle allows you to see the label of the bottles and have it be like a little show-off row. Sometimes it's even lit up by LED lighting. And 20 degrees is a safe angle to where the cork still stays wet. So we're going to take that and we are going to move that, rotate that around and move that into the room. Okay, so there we have it. We have this, I think if I remember correctly, this is 860 bottle wine storage with environmental control. a focal point on the back wall, little tasting area, marble tabletops, stemware rack, bottles on display back wall, bottles displayed in the slanted display row, and your wood case and bulk storage. And honest to goodness, after your first time, this would be less than right from scratch, a 1 hour design. And from your list of materials that you have available, you can change the floor surface, the wall colors, if you want to put sconces in there, materials that your business provides, by all means, have at it. But this is just the general overview of using this extensive design library that you'll have at your disposal. I'm just going to go to a pre-designed room now that has some elements that that I think would surprise people as wow, you got something out of a space that we didn't think you could get out. This is under a stairwell. I mean, this could have been almost useless space, or just a portion of it would have been under the stairwell closet, and the rest was just wasted space. So this room utilizes both the under the staircase elevation, as well as even sneaking in additional bottles and display along the short side of those walls in here. Using a combination of the metal racking and the wood racking, you're able to get both a traditional as well as a contemporary look to it. There in the library is what they call waterfall racking that's cascading down with a slope, so you have the ability to do that. It's not necessarily that this is going to be a gathering area, but if this had a glass front to it, they have an opportunity to put some artwork behind this tasting area. They've got the tabletop and the stemware rack overhead. The compound diamond bin for the bulk storage needs. It also provides a nice focal point when you look through that door at the space too. Wood case storage for the client's bulk storage needs, and they're liking to show the wood case design and storage element in the room. All in all, over 300 bottles were stored in this space. 300 bottles in a space that maybe nobody is thinking about. And I would say that if you can identify under the stairwell as a potential solution, as you can see, it can be done. So that's the design overview, the consultation overview. I know that is a lot for all of you in a short period of time that have never designed a wine storage solution before, but I'd be more than happy to take some of the questions that you have at this period, as well as letting you know that there isn't anything that we haven't seen before. As I said, I've been doing this for 17 years. I have seen some of the most insane, upon first glimpse, locations for wine storage, or somebody, multiple companies saying, no, we can't do that. We try it, and we love to have our partners and other designers around the country, around the world, try to use our library in a very unique situation and show them to us. But after this, if you ever have any questions and you've taken this library for a test drive, or you're wondering if you can achieve a certain look, how would you do it? Please don't hesitate to shoot us an email, and we'd be more than happy to assist
Well,
you.
great, Mark. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for showing us that wonderful demonstration. Before we get to the Q&A, I just want to go over this one slide here. And I want to thank everybody for participating, especially Mark, and for Jeremy Miller as well, who is instrumental in making this happen. CEU submissions can be done by using the online submission form found at nkba.org. So if you are NKBA certified, you will be able to go to nkba.org and enter your CEU for today's session. It is 0.1, so 1 hour's worth. Tomorrow you'll receive an email message with instructions for accessing the online evaluation. It only takes a few minutes of your time. We do value your feedback so that we can continue to improve our webinar programs. And then finally, if you are certified or need a certificate of completion or certified with another organization, you can send an email to learningfeedback at nkba.org, and a certificate of completion will be sent to you within 5 to 7 business days. So let me just go back here to Mark's screen, and let me give Mark the access to his microphone again. And we're ready for questions. And as a matter of fact, let's see here. There was a question, Mark, that did come up as you were doing your demo. And Diane had a question, and she said, when you say 1 linear foot for 40 or 50 bottles, is that floor to ceiling with 8-foot ceiling? And then the second part of that question is, and can the ventilation or climate control fit into the corner voids? Good question.
Yes, tremendous question. That is not referencing the height of the wine cellar. It's the length of the walls, not the height of the walls. So if the room is 6 feet deep, so that 6 linear feet in the depth of the room, the back wall width, say 7 feet, plus the other side wall 6 feet, add all those together, and that's where the linear footage comes from. Now, keep in mind, that is an average, and that's when the cellar may be at that 6.5 to 7.5 foot range. Obviously, the higher you go, that pushes the average potential capacity higher. Also, like even in a picture like this, if you see there's a cutout here and a stemware rack, well, there's no storage going on there. So these numbers, the 40 to 50 bottle general rule of thumb, applies to a modicum of things that aren't necessarily storing wine too. So great question, but I tell you, on average, that 40 to 50 per linear foot at a 6.5 to 7.5 foot height is perfect.
Okay, Mark, and then I think I'm not sure if you answered the other part of her question, but she says, and can the ventilation climate control fit into the corner voids?
Yes, it can. Now, that said, that leaves an element that needs to be considered. Number one, you don't want to block the flow of that air. There's 2 types of flow that are happening with this cooling unit. One is expelling the supply cold air to this room, and the other is the warm air rising up in the room and being returned to that cooling unit. So if you've got an obstruction around that cooling unit, even though that cooling unit may fit there, it may not be working to its greatest capacity that it can. Now, we have put a cooling unit into the void before, and we will have an interruption in that panel where that cooling unit is, both in front of it and at the side of it. So it's hiding there in the corner, but there's nothing that's obstructing it in front or to the side of it that's stopping it from doing its full function. Again, though, there are so many options for cooling units that there may be a cooling unit that works for your purpose that isn't even in the room at all.
So Diane had she said, well, maybe you can use screen or mesh corner divides. Would that work?
Absolutely. Also, I've seen louvered covers on cooling units. So if you had louvered panels or something like that, that absolutely would work.
Great. Okay, thanks. So Karen has a question about, does white wine need to be stored at a different temperature from reds or just cooled prior to drinking?
That's a good question, too. A white wine is generally drank at a colder temperature than a wine cellar would be storing at. People like their white wine down in the lower 40s, low to mid 40 degree temperatures. And I did mention that a wine cellar is going to keep wine generally between 50 and 58 degrees. So even with the red wine, when you pull that red wine out of there, you're going to open up a bottle and let it breathe for a while. And actually, red wine is drank at a higher temperature than 55 to 58. So while you're chilling your white a little further than 55 degrees, you're also letting your red wine come up to temperature after you've taken it out of the room. That all said, for both those wines to continue the proper maturity and their life and their growth inside of that bottle, 55 to 58 is the temperature. What you drink it at is your own business. So, but yes, many people pull that white wine out of the wine cellar and put it into the fridge prior to serving it.
Okay, a question from Kaylin. Thank you. What is the impact of vibrations to the quality of wine? And would wine cooling appliances create harmful or a large amount of vibration?
Another fantastic question. See, people are so far ahead of the curve already. I like that. Vibration along with heat and light are not good things for wine. You want to. There's a reason why wine once upon a time was stored in caves. Not only was it proper temperature and humidity, but there was nothing that was going to be moving this wine around, jogging it, vibrating it. You want to let a bottle sit and undisturbed as it grows and matures. Now, that's why it's very, very important to make sure that your cooling unit is not up against any edge of the wine racking. The wine racking in a full-blown wine cellar will be nailed and screwed to the wall, and everything's all supported and stuff, but you don't want the cooling unit directly coming into contact with that wine racking, so it's transmitting the vibration down the wall. Now, these cooling units have come so far in technology that the vibration from them is minimal to begin with. And a lot of these cooling units have the ability to even recess farther back into a wall to where the main components of the operation of this cooling unit is actually sitting behind the wall in another spot, even further taking the vibration out of the room. But as long as the cooling unit is not touching the racking in any shape or form, manner, you're in good shape.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so Karen has another question. What type of mechanical, electrical, plumbing requirements are needed for the remote chiller? She's saying dedicated circuit amperage. Is that typical, or a condensate line to exterior? And then she has a question about, how about the door to the room? What type of special weather stripping is needed, like an exterior door or something else? So there's a couple different questions there.
Okay, from the standpoint of the cooling units, there are cooling units that go through a wall, like the one that I just used, and they're available widely on the market, that don't have a requirement for a condensate line. They actually have a drip pan and a fan that's blowing across the tray and blowing the excess condensation out the back of the unit as exhaust, and you will never, ever need to have a condensate line. There are other units that are like remote units that are sitting off-site that have a condensate line, and if there is not a nearby drain, you can have a condensate line pump on there, running it the excess condensation to wherever it needs to go. And then also the electrical requirements for these units are the 60 amp available, 50 amp where it's required, and every cooling unit is going to vary from their electrical needs, but what we always say is we put them all, no matter what they are, through the wall or a remote unit. We put them on a dedicated circuit because you don't want anything tripping these units off and then not knowing, and your wine in the meantime is starting to warm up. Although that brings us to the second part of her question about the door and the actual preparation of the room. First of all, we can provide to you a full room preparation guide, which tells how to properly insulate a room, what kind of vapor barrier it needs to have, what kind of door requirements there are, what is ideal lighting and things like that. In general, we're talking about creating a room that is so buttoned up that it does require an exterior grade door with a full weather seal around it. If we're using glass, whether it be in the door or in side lights or in entire glass walls, we need to understand that that is putting a heat load, an excessive heat load on this room. So when we get our glass, we use our glass for that room, it is the highest grade R value that we can achieve from it. It is exterior grade glass. And that we use that information in properly calculating the right cooling unit for it. This is something that was not seen as often 15 years ago, rooms that are almost entirely glass walls. I mean, this tremendous visual that it creates is tremendous, but it also is a tremendous heat load on that room. And you just can't calculate what kind of cooling unit you're going to put in there by the cubic footage of the room because of this tremendous heat load that this low R value from the glass is putting on there. But we can provide you with cooling unit calculators to help you determine what the heat load is on the room, what size unit is expected. But when you're talking doors, glass, anything, exterior grade, and insulating a room as high as you can insulate it, we like R19 as a minimum, easily achieved now, especially with the spray foam, closed cell foam insulation. And a 4 to 6 millimeter vapor barrier. But with that closed cell foam insulation, that's your built-in vapor barrier too. So a buttoned up wine room, so there's no condensation forming on the glass. There's cooling units that are not going to be overworked.
Wow, great answer, Mark. Thank you. Very detailed. There's a question here about what type of drywall, do you suggest for walls when the cooling units are used?
Same thing would apply. We're talking about a room that's going to be at 55 to 60% humidity. And you can, because the room is properly insulated, proper vapor barrier, you could get away with regular standard sheetrock, but it doesn't hurt for the long-term life of that room to use a green board or moisture-resistant surface. And so green board is ideal, but because the room is buttoned up to not get excess condensation, standard sheetrock would work too.
Great. Okay. So how would you, let me just look here. Here's a lighting question. When lighting a wine room, are there any lighting concerns to address?
Yeah, low heat lighting, that's number one. If you have a climate controlled room, you don't want to have lighting in there that's pushing the throttle on this cooling system. So and of course LED has solved everybody's lighting problems. In terms of where to light up a room, in this particular project, you see that slanted display row that we talked about earlier is lit up. Maybe where you have your artwork and your tabletop, you would have some kind of puck light system in there. Again, LED if possible. Can lights, low heat. The heat and direct sunlight are a problem for wine. The LED light in the soft white is not an issue on either heat or light exposure for the wine.
Great. I have just a couple more questions for you, Mark. So someone's asking, how would you protect from vibration under the staircase? You had showed that example earlier. Well, first of all, in that situation of coming down the stairwell, there was nothing in that room that was attaching to the upper side of that stairwell, and I don't think that your vibration of your side walls there, when you talk about all of this wine racking being connected to itself and anchored to the wall, the vibration is absolutely minimal. So it's not a concern unless you're literally running straight down the elevation connected to the cascading wall of the room. Okay, question about, please address the weight of the bottles, wine, and racking. How do you know if the room can handle it?
As far as anchoring to and structural integrity, there is no room anywhere that I would just have freestanding wine storage in it. You're going to want to be anchored, basically base racking attached to upper racking, attached to the modular racking being attached side to side to side, and then at the top of every wine rack, you're going to have like a back spacer bar, potential attachment points to walls. And what I always tell my clients, and that you want to be very careful here because you've got electrical wiring and stuff like that. But anywhere where you have a stud and you can connect the top of the racking, which is already connected top to bottom and side to side, you pre-drill through the top back of the racks and put an anchor screw in there straight to a stud, and there's never going to be a structural integrity situation after that. We've done wine cellars. I personally have done wine cellars that have been in homes that the home was sadly, destroyed or severely damaged by earthquake, and I was sent pictures of the wine cellar standing tall. So, hopefully nobody will ever have to go through that, but the materials and the anchoring points and stuff solve all those problems.
Okay, and then there's another question here about wine refrigerators and vibrations. Is a significant amount since the cooling motor is in the unit holding the wine? So I think this is a slightly different question based on the refrigeration.
Right. Again, I would not be, I have designed, like in this particular cellar that's just up in this design idea element, is say right here they wanted to have a wine fridge because this whole entire cellar was not climate controlled. But they want to have some bottles that are stored in a wine fridge and kept at temperature. So I'm going to remove this wood case cabinet out of here, and I'm going to put a wine fridge there. I am not going to attach that wine fridge to any part of the racking. I may build a paneled frame around it. It may still have the toe molding lines that go across the front and such. But just like a cooling unit that would have been in the wall, I would have not had that wine fridge touching any element of racking, even though the racking can be done completely around it.
Okay, and then speaking of the refrigeration piece that you just mentioned, is there a particular brand of wine fridge you recommend to minimize effective heat to the surrounding room temp?
Well, any refrigerator unit that we have in a room is definitely going to be adding to that heat load on a room that we talked about. The one thing I do find is zero clearance is a big help, because that unit then can be all the way up to the wall of the wine room, and that seems to be more friendly with the specifications of and depths of wine racking. That's number one. And then number two is the better the unit is, the better rating that it has, the less time it's going to have to be running the compressor side of things. So good quality. I know that this market is inundated with very, very inexpensive. Go to any box store and you can seem to find yourself a wine fridge. But I promise you, in that industry, you get what you pay for. There is no doubt about it. And I would hate to have done a wine cellar specific design, or even a kitchen design for that matter, and skimped a couple of $100 on the wine fridge, only to have to pull this thing out 2 years down the road. Or if it was incorporated in a wine cellar design, that unit fails on you and you go out and you can't find a replacement that fits the specifications that the original wine cellar design was done in. So my recommendation is it doesn't have to be the most expensive, but also know the pitfalls of buying a very inexpensive one. And the standard players in the industry, especially in the people that know the kitchen and bath industry, know that companies like Sub-Zero make tremendous units, and they are, at least, even though they're units that don't run a lifetime, you can be pretty certain that the track record is better than a few years.
Okay, great. And then I have a final question here for you, Mark. Can a temperature-controlled wine room also act as a humidor for storing a person's cigars?
Fantastic question. As a cigar aficionado myself, I always look forward to somebody asking me that question too. If you do enjoy cigars, you would know that your humidor that you have for your cigars are controlling that at a humidity of about 70%, which is higher than the humidity that the wine cellar is going to be at, that 55 to 60%. That said, from a temperature standpoint, the 55 to 58 degrees is no harm whatsoever to the cigars. What you are going to have to do, though, is to, in some way, shape, or form, provide some additional humidification to those cigars. So you could have a box humidor sitting on this tabletop, and that humidor can still have its sponge apparatus in it controlling the humidity inside that box. And the proper storage of those cigars, those humidification devices in whatever you put, a cabinet, a box, or whatever, are going to last longer because the room is already at 55 to 60% humidity. So yes, absolutely, cigars are often stored and displayed in a wine cellar. Just knowing that you did extra 10 or 15% humidification specifically for them.